They called him the stranger, because no other name seemed to fit. He was not one of them, not born from the soil of the town, nor shaped by its customs. He appeared one morning as though conjured from mist, and from the very first moment, people sensed he carried a weight unlike any man they had known. Unlike travelers who passed through seeking shelter, or merchants who came to trade, he did not seem to belong anywhere, or to anyone. He carried no family, no friends, no history. When asked where he came from, he only gave a small, tired smile, as though the question was too shallow to deserve an answer. The smile itself unsettled people more than silence might have. It was not mocking, not unkind, but distant, like a man who had walked too many roads and seen too many things to waste time explaining himself. He rented the upper room of the abandoned tavern at the edge of town. The building itself was falling apart. Broken shutters, a roof patched with mismatched tiles, dust thick on the counters. No one had lived there for years. But the stranger chose it without hesitation, as though he had known it all his life. He swept the room clean, repaired the lock on the door, and lit candles that burned late into the night. The townspeople noticed quickly. At first, they avoided him. They crossed the street when he passed. They lowered their voices when he came into the market. But slowly, curiosity began to outweigh fear. Some watched him from their windows, whispering. Others invented reasons to linger nearby, hoping to overhear a word, a clue about who he was. Yet he gave them nothing. His habits were strange. He rose before dawn, disappearing into the forest until midday. When he returned, his clothes carried the scent of moss and earth, and his hands bore faint streaks of ink. He bought almost nothing, no meat from the butcher, no bread from the baker. Yet he was never seen starving. Some claimed he lived on wild herbs and berries. Others swore they saw him speaking to the forest itself, as though the trees bent closer to hear him. Most unsettling of all was his notebook. Wherever he went, he carried it, an old leather-bound book with corners worn thin and pages stained from years of use. He wrote in it constantly, in the square, in the tavern's window, on the riverbank. The writing was frantic, as though the thoughts inside him were rushing to escape. Those who caught glimpses of the pages said they were filled not with words alone, but with symbols. Circles within circles, spirals, patterns that looked like maps to places no one had ever seen. One evening, a farmer named Tobias worked up the courage to approach him. "You're not from here," Tobias said, his tone half accusation, half question. The stranger looked up, his pen pausing. "Does anyone truly come from anywhere?" he asked. The answer was so unexpected that Tobias faltered. He opened his mouth to reply, then closed it again. The stranger returned to his writing, as though the conversation had ended. Tobias walked away, shaken, though he could not explain why. From then on, the stranger spoke rarely, but when he did, his words cut deep. To the widow at the well, he said, "You carry grief like a stone in your pocket. You think it weighs you down, but you do not see that it keeps you from being blown away." To the blacksmith's apprentice, he murmured, "Your hands are strong, but your heart is stronger. One day you will forge more than iron." Each time the person left unsettled, wondering how he had known such things. Whispers grew louder. Some said he was blessed, touched by God. Others claimed he was cursed, a demon in human form. The children, of course, feared him the least. They followed him at a distance, daring one another to creep closer. He never scolded them, never chased them away. Instead, he sometimes paused, turned, and held their gaze with those unreadable eyes until the children fled, squealing with nervous laughter. Yet even in their laughter, they admitted they felt as though he had seen straight into their souls. The priest began to preach against him. "Beware the stranger," he warned. "He carries a serpent's knowledge in his book, and his tongue drips poison disguised as wisdom." But others argued. "How can words of comfort be poison?" they asked. "How can truth be evil?" Divisions grew. Markets filled with arguments. Families quarreled at dinner tables. Was the stranger a prophet or a madman? A savior or a curse? Meanwhile, the stranger himself seemed unaffected. He continued his long walks, his endless writing, his silent presence. Only once did he show emotion. One night, when the moon was full and silver light spilled over the rooftops, a young woman named Clara found him at the edge of the river. She had come there to weep, her grief too heavy to carry home. But before she could hide, she realized he was already there, staring into the water. "Do you ever feel," he asked, suddenly, without turning, "that the world is nothing but a reflection, that what we see is only the surface, and what lies beneath is too vast, too deep, too frightening to comprehend?" Clara, startled, could not answer. But when he turned to her, his eyes glistened, not with fear, not with anger, but with sorrow. For a moment he looked not like a stranger, but like a man utterly alone in the world. Then the moment passed, and he walked away, leaving her trembling by the river. From that night onward, Clara swore she saw him differently. He was not just a mystery, not just a shadow. He was a man carrying a burden too heavy for any one soul, a burden he could not share, yet could not put down. The town did not understand him, but slowly they began to realize something. He did not need to be understood. He was not seeking their approval, their acceptance, or their belief. He was simply waiting. For what? None of them knew. But in their hearts, they sensed it. Whatever he was waiting for, it would change everything.
Story sound. Every town has its stories, but this one was different. Hidden between crumbling walls, narrow streets, and the silence of forgotten nights, there was a whisper that refused to die. People spoke of a stranger, a man who carried with him no family, no past, and no future that anyone could imagine. They said he wasn't like the rest of them. His eyes were restless, searching for something invisible, something just beyond the veil of ordinary life. Children were told not to go near him. Elders lowered their voices when his name was mentioned, as though speaking too loudly might summon him. The rumor was simple yet terrifying. This man had discovered a secret, not just any secret, but the secret, the truth about life itself. Some swore they saw him at night, standing under the old street lamp with his notebook, filling its yellowed pages with strange markings that looked like a mix of mathematics, poetry, and madness. Others claimed he wandered into the forest, speaking to the trees as though they were answering him. For most, it was easier to laugh it off, to call him insane. But in every laugh, there was a tremor of fear, because deep down, people wondered, what if it was true? The man's arrival was never noticed. He had no introduction, no announcement. One day, he was simply there, like a shadow that had always belonged. His clothes were worn, his shoes carried the dust of many roads, and his voice, when he rarely spoke, was soft but unsettling. He never asked for money, never begged for food, yet he never seemed to go hungry. He simply existed, quietly, as though he was waiting for the world to catch up to something only he could see. And then came the night that changed everything. A young boy, curious and bold, had followed him to the edge of the town square. Hidden behind a broken cart, the boy watched as the man opened his notebook beneath the flickering light. His hands moved quickly, filling the pages with symbols that glowed faintly, as if lit from within. The boy swore that for a moment the air itself bent around him like heat waves rising from stone. Terrified, the boy ran home, but not before the man's eyes lifted and locked onto his. In that brief second, the boy felt as though his entire life had been read, written, and understood. By morning, the story had spread like fire. "He carries the pattern of the world in his book," some said. "He speaks to things that do not exist," whispered others. A group of men decided to confront him, to demand answers. But when they went to his room above the abandoned tavern, he was gone. All that remained was the faint smell of smoke and a single page from his notebook lying on the floor. The page was filled with lines and circles, intersecting at impossible angles, yet somehow forming the shape of an eye. Those who looked at it for too long said the drawing seemed to move, to watch, to breathe. The townspeople grew divided. Some wanted him driven out, believing he had brought a curse. Others were drawn to him, desperate to know the truth he carried. For if he truly had discovered something greater than the world itself, then perhaps he also held the key to their lives, their futures, their salvation. But the stranger remained silent. He spoke only once to an old woman who asked why he stayed in such a forgotten place. His reply was simple, almost cruel. Because the forgotten places are where the truth hides best. From that day, the rumor became more than a story. It became a shadow over every home, a question whispered in every prayer. What did he know, and what would it cost to learn it? And so the town waited, hearts divided, breaths held, for they knew that a secret of this magnitude could never stay buried forever.